Aruch HaShulchan, I think, speaks out. I think it's in either Hilchos Gittin or Hilchos Kesubos that never did you find in Chazal, in the Torah, in the Rishonim, someone should have two names. There's no such thing as someone having two names. There was Yitzchak, there was Yaakov, there was Daniel. No one had two names. And even Abba Shaul was his name. Abba was a title. There's only one, and by the Rishonim also. There was no such thing as two names, except for one place in Gan Shas. There's a Rishon that has two names. And that's on Kesubos Daf Tzadik Ches on the base. So if you look in the large Tosfos, Amar Apapa, about a little bit less than halfway down, smack the middle of the line, Shol Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael Es Rabbi Natan. That's the earliest recorded place where someone had two names, Yaakov Yisrael.
Yeah, there are some. There has to be in Mauritius. Some of those kids had. What's his name? Has two names.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's two names. I'm not sure how the Urch would learn that. But maybe it's a title. I don't know. But there's two Lakai just ploy me on one. It could be that wasn't me. That was just they referred to me. No, but that's what the Aruch HaShulchan says. That this is the first case of you find someone had two names. Okay, let's see the Heilig of the Gemara weiter. So I think you finished on Daf Tzadik Ches on the base, and the discussion that we were having was Zovan Lischa. Someone hired a shliach to sell on his behalf a property that was a half a kor. V'azal v'zovan leikura. And the shliach sold double the amount of property that the Mishalech wanted him to sell. So do you say he did the shlichus of the bailim, but he did extra? So that he did for the shlichus, the lischa, would be chal. That would be a good mechira. It's only the extra that's not chal. Or do you say that since he didn't do precisely what he was sent to do, none of what he did was chal? That was the shaila. Now I believe you looked at the first Toshma, right? You're up to the second Toshma. Yeah. So Toshma, we're now 7 lines from the bottom of Daf Tzadik Ches Days. Toshma. Our Mishnah, if her ksuba was a mona, umorchra shava mona, v'diner b'mona, and she sold shava mona v'diner b'mona. And when we learned the Mishnah, the way most people would have understood it was she sold a piece of property that was worth a mona and a dinner, and she took a discount. She shortchanged them, and she only charged a mona for it. Mecher bottle. But the Gemara wants to suggest that's not pshat. My love, the zovan shava mana v'dinner. She sold it for the right price. So what does it mean? She sold it for a mana. Umay b'mana. It means mana shalah. It means in order to honor what they owed her, a mana, she sold a property that was a mana and a dinner, but she got the full price for it. Umay afilu, even if she pays back. Afilu hioimeres achzer sedinner liyoshim b'dinner mekakoi. She says, this extra property that I bought, I'll buy it back. The extra property that I sold, I'll buy it back on behalf of the assignment, and I'll return your property to where it belongs, and I'll only have my money. And even in that case, the Katani, our Mishnah Paskins, machra bottle, her sale is bottle. So you have a rye from here that since she had a shlichus from the assignment to sell, but she oversold. We don't say that what she oversold is bottle. We say everything is bottle. Omar Rav Huna Rav Nosson, you don't have a raya because loy b'da'ozel. Shot in the Mishnah is like we originally understood it, is that she sold a property that was worth a money and a dinner, but she only got a money for it. So she undercharged. And that's why it's bottle, because she undercharged for the property. And that's already the Sekush Shadat, that's what it was. In fact, the Gemara, the next case, a later case in the Mishnah, is discussing a case where she sold a property for less than its value. So it doesn't make sense to say that the Mishnah would say the same Chiddush twice. Have a ratio, then the ratio would have to be a case similar to what we said, where she sold it for the proper price, the problem was merely that she sold too much. Where do you see that the Mishnah already addresses a case where she sold for lower than its value? The Katami Seifa. The end of the Mishnah we learned says, Hoysa Kesubos arba meyazuz. What if her ksuba was a total of 400 zuz? Machar lazeh, which means she sold 300. She sold 3 parcels of property, each for a mana, and now the remaining owing on her ksuba is 1 mana. Ula achroin yofe mana udinar bimana. And the last portion of property that she sold a little bit too much property, and she accepted less than what she was owed. So the halacha is shal achroin machar batal. V'shal kulon, but the prior 3 sales, which were appropriate, kulon machan kayim. So here you have a perfect example of a case where she sold property for less than it was worth, and the Mishnah already says that the mecher is batal. So the earlier case in the Mishnah that seems to be discussing the identical case is in fact not the identical case. You have to say it's a case where she sold it for its full value, and the reason why the mecher is batal is because we paskin that it's called maver al devarafu and not most of al devar. So they're both speaking where she sold a property for less than it was worth. So why do we need the Mishnah to repeat this halacha twice? The Seifa Hakamash Malon, there's a chiddush in the Seifa where it's the 4th piece of property that you sold, that even there the mecher is batal. Why? The chiddush is not that the mecher is batal. The chiddush is that the 3 earlier sales actually hold. The Seifa Hakamash Malon. Time of the oizel b'diyasme. The reason why the mecher is batal is because she sold for less than it was worth. Aval b'didah mecher kayim. But if she only messed up herself, her mecher is kayim. Frek the Gemara, hamidireisha shamish mina. Oh, I apologize. I jumped ahead of myself. Zok the Gemara, maybe hakamash long time of the oizel b'diyasme. The problem is that she ripped off the Yisraelim, and the Yisraelim are going to lose. But if she ripped herself off, for instance, she sold a property that was worth a masayim, and she sold it for a mana, they're mechakayim, the mecher is kaim, and she has to absorb the loss. Right? That was the first case of the Mishnah. So, frankly, more, how do you say that's the chiddush in this case? This halacha we know already. If her ksuba was masayim, umachra shava mana b'masayim, and she sold a shava mana b'masayim, or shava masayim b'mana, or she sold a property that's worth masayim for a mana, this kabel tzubasa. It's her loss. So we already know that if she undercuts herself, it's kayim. So what is the chiddush of these 2 halachas where she seemed to have sold a property for a dinner less than it was worth? So where do we say that the mecher is batal? That's only if when she sold it, it was one big mecher and she oversold a little bit. But at that point in the mecher, there's nothing left. This is her last interaction with them, because this ends the whole relationship with them, because she's being fully paid up. But in this case, where there was a long interaction, in other words, she sold one property and then a second property, then the third property, and now she's selling the 4th property, nigzar, let's make a gzera, mana rishon atu mana achar. The earlier sales were valid, but maybe if we allow the earlier sales to be valid, it will also validate the latest sale. So maybe they should all be batal. Kamash malam, that the earlier sales are not batal. Let's see Rashi. If she's making one sale, but she's reducing the value, she's selling her property for too little, that's where we'll say right away that the mecher is batal. It doesn't impact anything else. The lekel and mixer midi, there's no gzer, there's nothing to be gozer for. Aval hacha, but in this case, where the case where she undersold was the 4th in a series of sales, aval hacha de b'mechir rishoina lo yistalkala. When she sold the first piece of property, she was not ending the relationship. There was still money owing on the tzuba. Ema, let's say, im tasa b'mana rishon nami ye mecher batal. Maybe if she made a mistake in the first mana, her mecher should also be batal, and you don't say that she just takes the loss. Atu mana achroin, similar to a case where if it was the last piece of property that she was selling where there is no recourse for the assignment. So we shouldn't say mecher kayim. Kamash malon tafilu achi dafka the toss of b'mana achrain of the b'mana rishon mecher kayim. If she made a mistake in the first one, we'll say her sale is valid, but let's say she sold a property that was worth a month of a dinner, and she only got a month for it, we'll deduct what they owe her by a month and a dinner, because that's how much property she sold, even though she didn't get enough money for it. But the last property that she sells, we can't do that, because now they don't owe her the month and the dinner. So they're going to be losing. So there we're mevatel the mekach, but we're not mevatel the earlier mekach. Okay. The Ikadamri, there's another version to how the Shiloh went down. So the first version of the Shiloh was the Shliach sold more than the Shliach was authorized to sell. The Ikadamri, halated boila. If the Shliach sold more than he was authorized to sell, everybody agrees. When the Shliach oversold, the Vade Mosif al Devorcha. Everybody would agree that the part that he sold that was connected what the Mishalech wanted him to sell, that's valid. And will only invalidate what he sold more than the Mishalech asked him to sell. But Kisa Bailach, where we do have a Shaila, is exactly the opposite case. The Amalei Zil Zvavin Likura. The Moichas that sell me a full kur, the Ozil Bezavin Leilischa, and he only sold half of what he was instructed to sell. Do we say that it's a good sale? Me, I'm reading Amalei, the Tamalach Abdillah. The Shliach could say, I did what was best for you. The Eloi Mitztachelach Zuze, this way, if you end up not needing as much money as you thought you would need, you could at least salvage that property they didn't sell. Lemot is Hadrashbei. Oidilma, idiot, I told you I need you to sell this, I know how much money I need. Oidilma, now I'm going to have to make another sale. And he doesn't look good for a person who's showing sale after sale after sale after sale, because that seems to indicate that he's struggling terribly financially, and he's about to go bankrupt, and he's liquidating his assets. So that looks very bad for him. So Fakert, he wouldn't want that. And I believe there are coins it as follows. When someone says, please sell a core of property for me, does he mean sell a property for me, but no more than a core? Or does he mean to say, sell a core? Exactly. And that's the Shaila. The Shaila is, is he happy with the fact that maybe a little less was sold? And this way, if he doesn't need as much money, he doesn't have to figure out how to get his property back. Or do you say he wants to avoid doing multiple sales? So Amar B'Chadini Misur Tashma. Let's see if we have a right. Nosan Loidina shows up. So once again, we're talking about Me'ila, like we discussed before. Normally we say Ein Shlich L'Dvar Aveira, but Me'ila is one of the things where you say Yesh Shlich L'Dvar Aveira when the Shliach was doing precisely what the Mishalayach sent him to do. So Tashma, Nosan Loidina shows up. Someone gave his friend the Dinah shows up, unbeknownst to either of them, that it was Mois Hektish. He told the Shliach, Have li chaluk. Buy me a jacket. Now a dinner zov is worth six. Is it Shkolim? Rashi gives us the exact. She's a sloyim. A dinner zov is worth 6 sloyim. So instead of spending the full 6 sloyim on this jacket, he only spent 3 sloyim. Apparently, it was a less expensive jacket. It wasn't a Hugo Boss. It was not Barney's. It was what are the names of the cheaper clothing stores in Lakewood? They have his place. It was a his place special. Nowadays, I don't know anymore. It was a his place special. The heavy like the sholosh chaluk. So he still spent all the money, but he spent 3 on the jacket with sholosh talis, and with 3 he bought a talis. So the Allah is shnei ma'al. Side of Balabais was moil, obviously because we say his shlichus was fulfilled, and side the shlich was moil because he did something on his own. If you're going to say that when someone undersells, or in this case, he underbought, or he really undersold because he undersold the money that the Balabais gave him, right? So it's considered a good shlichus. And what he added is most of all the Varav, Shemachi Balabai is small. That would explain why the Balabai is small. Because even though the person only bought a chaluk for 3 rather than 6, it's still considered that he fulfilled the shlichus of the balabait. If you hold that if you undersell, it's not considered doing the Ratzon balabais even for the first half. Why is the balabais small? If he bought me a jacket for less than I asked him to spend, then he didn't do what I asked him to do. This he did do what he asked him to do because he got a good deal. He actually, sure, you wanted a jacket worth 6. He got you a jacket worth 6. He just got you a great deal on it. He got you a great deal. So therefore, we're speaking in a case where he actually was fulfilling the Ratzon of the Mishaleach by buying a jacket that was worth 6, but he got a great deal. So if that's the case, normally if you underbuy or you undersell, you weren't the kind of shlichus. Here's a special case. You bought him exactly what he wanted, you just got a better deal on it. Frankly, why was the shliach mol if he bought the owner exactly what the owner wanted? Because he spent an extra $300. Frankly, that cannot be the case. The case has to be where he actually bought a cheaper jacket. How do I know? Because if you look at the Sefer, there's a dissenting opinion. Even in this case, where he bought a jacket for 3 rather than 6, Balabayis loymol. The Balabayis is not moil because it wasn't his shlichus. You know why? Because the Balabayis will say, I wanted a more expensive jacket, not a cheaper jacket. So you see Uriah from their clothes. It's not shot. I got the same jacket that he wanted. I just got a better deal on it. Because clearly from Rabbi Yehuda, you see that he ended up buying a smaller jacket, a lesser value jacket. He bought him the what's it called again? His place. He got him a his place jacket and not a Barney's jacket. So no, that's not what the Balabais means with Ra. You bought me exactly what I told you. But I wanted you to get even a better deal. Instead of buying a jacket for 6 and paying 3, I wanted you to pay 6 and get me a jacket that was worth 12. Umay Ra Rabidomin. You made a bad deal because you didn't maximize what my money could have got for me in good deal. The Amalei, the ISIS Libishish, if you would have spent 6 on the jacket, it would have been worth 12. So I would have gotten even a better bargain. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda holds, even in this case, it's not called that the shliach to the shlichus to the balabais, because even though you got me exactly the jacket that I wanted, that's not what I wanted. I wanted you to give me the best deal by spending 6 sloyim. However, the Tanakama holds that lamaisa you bought me the jacket that I wanted, and therefore also shlichusai, and therefore the balabais is more. But in the case where I ask you to sell a kur and you only sell a lesech, that's not called doing mashlichus. Dekanami, I'll prove to you that the brisa that we just talked about was not a case where you bought a lesser value jacket. Rather, you got a great deal, and the Yehuda's time is you could have got even a better deal. The Katani, because in this brisa itself, in the Tosefta it says, Moide Rabbi Yehuda bekitnius. In the case of kitnius, so not in the case of buying jackets, but buying kitnius, Rabbi Yehuda was moida sheshnei mo'alu, that they were both moil. You know why? Because you don't get a good deal by spending more when you're buying kitnius. Shekitnius besela, the kitnius perputa. It happens to be that when you buy beans, there's a set amount, and whether you're buying a seller worth or even a small pruta worth, you're going to get the same ratio of kitnius to your money. You won't get a better deal. So there, Rabbi Yehuda is moida, in fact, that it would have been a good me'ilah, because there he did what the balabais wanted. But in a case where things have a value that change based on want, like real estate or unique products, there, of course, the balabais is a good taina that spending more would have got me even a better deal. Shmamina. Zok to Gemara, hey Chedami, what are we talking about when we say that you don't get a better deal on things like kidneys? Ilema ba'asra de mezabne b'shuma. If it's a place where they don't have set amounts for a dozen eggs or for a pound of beans or whatever it is, rather there's always a give and take in an assessment. So everybody would agree that the more you spend, the better deal you're going to end up getting from the merchant. Amar Papa, Zok Papa, you're right. We're speaking about Asher the Chayli Bekani. We're speaking in a city where they sell it by the bushel or by the basket. Kani was some type of container that held a certain amount of beans. It was $1 per container. If it's $1 per container, then if you buy 10 containers, you pay $10. But there's no special deal. The Amarlei kana bepruta. And therefore, the Balabais can't tanya that had you bought more, there would have been a better deal. Because in such cases, there's no better deal. Tashma. Back to our mission. Her ksuba was 400 zuz. She sold to one for a mana. So it doesn't really mean she only sold twice. Like we looked earlier, she sold parcels of land for 1 month at a time, 3, and then the last one, and the last one, she seemed to have sold a property that was worth more than the mana, but she only took a mana from it. So the loch is shall achrin bottle, shall kulon machrin kai. So you have a rye from here. You have a rye from here. Here's a case where she over. So let's see Rashi what the rye is. So kulon machrin kai. The hacha. Oh, the lezvuni ba'arba meya shadrua. Right, they sold her to sell in one fell swoop to pay for her whole ksuba for 400. And rather than do that, she sold it piecemeal. Isn't that exactly the case that we're discussing? She was told to sell 400 and she sold 100. Why is the first one kind? Right? She's also making the Nichse Yisraelim look like they're having a fire sale, selling a little bit at a time. I understand, so she should have sold it all in one shot. The chiluk is, it looks bad for her. It looks bad for the Yisraelim that they're struggling financially, that they're trying to fund money and they can't. Because the svara that the Gemara said earlier is that it's not good for somebody to have a lot of shtaris mechira in their name because it looks like they're liquidating. Well, that's the shiloh that we're discussing, aren't we? Zok the Gemara, Kadam Rab Sheisha B'Rei Davidi, regarding another kasha we're going to see later. Rab Sheisha B'Rei Davidi says, Biktini. The reason why she didn't sell all 400 in one time is she didn't. It was a big property, and she sold it off piece by piece. There were 4 small properties, so there she had no choice. Hachanami Biktini. So too, to answer this kasha, we can say that the reason why her shlichus is a good shlichus is because she had no choice but to sell each one separately. Like Rashi says, Biktini. These 4 fields that she sold were not different portions of the same field. They weren't right for one person. The mikara adaiti dahachi nasa shliach. Originally, when she was made a shliach, being at the 14 field, typically one person isn't going to buy 14 fields. One person is going to want to buy one larger field. So therefore, it was understood from the beginning that you would have to make 4 separate sales. What if the mishalayach told the shliach, sell this piece of property, but I only want you to sell it to one person, and he spoke of v'loy l'shnayim. Don't split it up into 2 sales. So there, it's very clear that I have a concern that I don't want too many shtaris on me. And he's pretty clear here. There's no option to say that would be a good shlichus. But what if he said, sell it la'echad, stama? He didn't speak out v'loy l'shnayim. V'loy pirish v'loy l'shnayim. So the Gemara wants to know, does that also mean v'loy l'shnayim, or that's just the way people speak? My what talon? Rafuna Amar la'echad v'loy l'shnayim. When someone says la'echad, that's what it means. La'echad v'loy l'shnayim. And if the seller splits it up, it won't be a good sale. Rabchista, for Rabbi Bar Rafuna, the Amri Tarveyu, they both say la'echad v'afilu l'shnayim. If you said la'echad and you didn't speak out v'loy l'shnayim, then you could even split it up into 2 people. La'echad v'afilu l'meya. You could even split up to 100 people, because la'echad is just the normal way people speak. Zokt Rashi la'echad v'afilu l'shnayim delavu chayu de'inchi dekampi. People are in the matbi. V'ainami la'kapit. That's normally how you speak. Sell it to somebody for me. If you have a kapit, have him a farish v'lo l'shnayim. Sell it to somebody. Sell to a guy. But unless he speaks out below the Shnaim, we will assume that what he meant. I guess so. Okay, so Ikloy Rab Nachman l'Sura. Rab Nachman showed up to Surah. Oil legabei Rab Chista v'Rabbi Bar Rafuna. Rab Chista and Rabbi Bar Rafuna wanted to ask him a shayla. Amrullah, they ask him, Ki hai gavnu maya. So what is the halacha? We have a shiloh over here. When someone says la'echad, is it dafka or not? Amalu, Rab Nachman paskin la'echad ba'afilu l'shnayim, la'echad ba'afilu l'meya. So he paskin that unless you say la'echad and you speak out v'loy l'shnayim, you're in fact allowed to sell it to as many people as you want. So then they saw that Rab Nachman wasn't so fast to disqualify a sale, because even though a person said la'echad and this person didn't follow the instructions clearly, maybe you see that Rab Nachman isn't so makbid on the shliach following. So they try to push the envelope. They ask him, what if the shliach also sold it for less than the proper price? Would you also say that the sale still is valid? No. I'm not going that far. I'm only saying that if he sold it to multiple people instead of one person. But of course, if he undercharged, of course the mecher is bottle. They told him, how could you say the mecher is bottle if he undersold the property? Mar said that when it comes to karka, there's no. There's a whole shayla. They're showing what this means. If this means dafka by a sixth, or even if it's more than a sixth, where it's mecher bottle, because Allah would normally by a no, is if it's less than a sixth, then there's mechila. If it's exactly a sixth, the mecher is kayim, but the person who was ripped off, the person who did the ripping off, has to refund the money. And if it's more than a sixth, then the mecher is completely nullified. So the question is, when we say ein nolak hakayis, what does that mean? There are those who learn it means there's never a nolak hakayis. The Yerushalmi brings a machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Shlokish. The Tosfos quotes that if you charge double the price by karka, there's also a no, so up to double the price. And then there's the shita, I believe, of Rashi holds that there's no nolak hakayis is only if it's exactly a sixth that the mecher is kayim and you return it. But in every other way, there is a nolak hakayis. Right, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. It's a very good. The Gemara is going to make that point. But the Gemara is saying since by karka is not such a big deal, so if the shliach messes up, we should give him those same rules. And the Gemara answers exactly what you say. When you're dealing with somebody and there's a mistake, then you say no. But a shliach doesn't have that leeway, because Amar Lei, the Mishalech can say, I can say when I appointed you as a shliach, it was to do something that would be helpful for me, not to mess me up. So the shlichus will be bottled even with a small amount. Showing that's exactly what you were saying, right? Umina Tamra, and how do I know the shiny ben shliach lebalabais? How do I know there's actually that distinction? It's not me learned. If you appoint the shliach and you tell him, say with Troy, go take truma for me. In other words, I have grain that's tevel. Please separate the truma for me. Now we know that there's three levels of truma. A normal guy gives 2%, 1 out of 50. Someone who's more great will give 1 out of 40, which is more than 2%. It's not 3%, but it's more than 2%, right? And someone who's more stingy will give 1 out of 60, which is less than 2%. Now you made a shliach and he doesn't know, well, how much do you want to give? You want to give 1/40th, 1/50th, or 1/60th. So the law is Torah Gedas Balabais. The shliach has to give based on what the Balabais would want. But what if the shliach does not know? Then to play it safe, Torah Bebeinis, which is Echad Mechamisha. What happens if the shliach was wrong? Pichas Asara or Hoysev Asara. He either went up a tenth or below a tenth. Then truma, his truma would be truma. But that's it. If he overestimated or underestimated by more than a tenth, then his hakroshes truma is not valid. I'm sorry? That's right. That's right. That's right. The ilugabe balabais, but if the balabais himself made a mistake when he was being mafresh his own truma, Tanya we learned, Taram even if he gave 5%, truma, his truma is a good truma. So you see clearly that when it comes to a shliach, there's this taina that the shliachus will be bought. So there's a shayla's fault. What happens if you hire a shliach to sell a property for you, and he undersells? Okay, so now we're saying the mekach is bottle, and the mekach is bottle, and the mekach is bottle. So what the lakeach has a time like you screwed me up. So very interesting. None of the Rishonim, the Shulchan Aruch does not mention this. The Rambam adds an addendum to these halachas, and he says as follows: the Shulchan Aruch says that if when you told the shliach, you said no matter what, if you oversell or undersell, I'm giving you full power of attorney, then you can't say those which is what you just said. But we're talking about a regular case of a shliach. Even if you're off by a drop, I can say the sukkun shadarti. But what about lakeach? Zok the Rambam, it depends. If when the shliach made the sale to the buyer, he told him, or to the seller, depending on what he was doing, he said, I'm not doing this on my own, I'm actually representing the owner, representing the vendor or the purchaser. Then if the shliach messed up and now the transaction is invalidated, it's too bad for the lakeach or for the moicher, because the other party knew that he was dealing with a shliach. He knew it's possible that if there's a mistake, it would get lost. But if the shliach did not tell the third party that he was a shliach, and now he messed up, what happens is the mechir is valid, and the shliach now has to pay back the mishalech, because otherwise you mess up the shliach. So it's not mentioned anywhere in the Gemara. The Rambam says this. I think the Kesubos says in the Rambam that this is the Rambam's own. That's how he understood it. Because if not, the Rambam would have shared like, well, it's not fair to the third party, messing around with it. Tashma, Kesubos arba me'esus. What if a woman had a ksuba for 400 zuz? Our Mishnah. Mocher lazeh b'mona, v'lazeh b'mona, u'la'achrin shavim mona v'diner b'mona. So the lochni shal achrin botol v'shal kulon mechran kai. So fragt Rashi, so explains Rashi, v'yafushi shtar kpeidah, if there's a kpeidah on having too many stars, the same kash in reverse. Hinami di yisoymim loy galu datayu, even though the yisoymim didn't complain, anan mia the yad yisoymim ba'inon l'mahavi, we as a bezin have to protect the yisoymim, and we should say that the mecher should be bottled. All of them should be bottled. So anan mia the yad yisoymim ba'inon l'mahavi is to the member mecher bottled. We should say it's bottled. So how come they all work? The same answer as we said before. It's speaking where these were small individual properties and it was understood that you would sell each of them separately. Okay, let's chop the Mishnah. I didn't prepare this, so we'll learn it together. What happens if they were selling through Best and the Dayanim made a mistake by a sixth? They made a big mistake in assessing its value. Or I guess a property was being sold through Best. So she was claiming her ksuba, and it was, let's say, a case where she wasn't entitled to bezonia, so it had to be sold through Bezdin. Like we had earlier, that according to Reb Shimon, even if she got part of her ksuba already, she can no longer collect bezonias, and therefore she could not collect only with Bezdin. Or if it's gerushin, if she was divorced and she wanted to claim her ksuba, she has to go with Bezdin. So Bezdin did it, and Bezdin made a mistake. So the law is machrin bottle. If they made such a gross mistake, their mecher is going to be bottle. Shimon ben Gamliel Aimer machrin kain. Their sale will still stand. Frank Gemara imkain ma koyach bezdin yofe. It has to be kain, Shimon Gamliel, because then it makes the bezdin look foolish. You have to say the koyach bezdin is that their transaction remains steadfast even if there's a mistake. Avalim also igeris b'koris b'neim. And I don't know what that means. That's Rashi. Igeris b'koris is hachroza. If they made a hachroza, the loshen b'koris means shemavakrin oisa b'nei adam or the hachroza. So they made like a viewing, like a public sale, so people were able to put bids on it, which would give us a pretty good idea of what its value is. Then afilu machri shavamana b'masayim or shavmasayim b'mana mechen kayim, because property has a value based on what people are willing to pay for it. And if you see people that were willing to pay for it more or less, that in fact validates what the proper charge was. Okay, we stop here? Good. A lot better than yesterday.